So in this tutorial we're going to take a look at multi-body parts, and that's going to lead us into using configurations within a part as well. So the product that we're going to use as an example of this is an Allen key, or a series of Allen keys, or a hex wrench if you'd rather call it that, and the base part, the base feature that we're going to use to create this part is a swept boss base feature. So if you haven't already done the tutorial for the swept boss, it might be worth doing that first, because I'm just going to quickly run through creating that. So I'm just creating a profile shape and a path shape to send the profile around. So these Allen keys tend to be an L shape and then have a hexagon profile that runs along the L. So I'm just creating the L shape first, just quickly dimensioning this up so it's fully defined, and then I'm going to sketch the hexagon profile as well. So this first Allen key, I'm going to make it a 6mm key, so I'm dimensioning across the flats here, setting that at 6mm. I'm just going to lock it onto one of the base planes. There we go. And then we're pretty much ready to create our sweep feature. So here we go. It's asking for the profile shape first, so we'll give it that. Then it's asking for the path. Give it that. We get a preview. So that's basically our base part. So the first thing that we're going to look at is multi-body parts. And the reason I've chosen this is that often when you buy these Allen keys, if you pay a little bit more money for the slightly more expensive ones, they have a rubberized grip on their center section, and during use this grip will never be removed. Once it's been molded on there in the factory, it will stay on the Allen key throughout its life. So even though the part, if you want to regard it as that, the Allen key as a whole has two distinct materials or two distinct components, they've essentially been bonded together during production such that they'll never be separated from one another. So when you have a component such as that has two pieces that will not be separated, but that are two distinct bodies, if you want to call them, you can model them as a multi-body part, and we're going to do that here. So we created our base feature there, just a standard sweep, and then what we're going to do is I think we'll create an extrude feature to represent the sleeve, or the molded on rubber handle portion. So I think what we'll do is we'll just quickly sketch on the front plane here. We can do a convert entities from this bottom face, so we've just taken a copy of the shape of that bottom face. And then I think what we'll do is we'll just sketch out a circle, and then if we dimension this circle by a dimension from one of these points to the circle itself, and if like mine just did, your dimension tries to dimension from the center of the circle, the way that you stop it from doing that is get your dimension tool, click on a point at the edge of the hexagon there, and then if you hold down the shift key and go to your circular edge, you can see that it's allowing me to dimension the distance between those two. So I'm going to reduce that down to something quite small. 0.2 is good enough. So this is the shape of our rubber handle, and what we're going to do is we're just going to create an extrude to represent this. So if we just go into features, extrude, and then you can see that it's given me a preview. It's gone in the wrong direction, so I can flip that here, and then more than that I'm going to put an offset in for its start point. So let's say 50 just to get going. Again, the 50's gone below the part, so I just need to flip that. You can see there the extrude now begins part of the way up this arm. So I'm just going to reduce that down slightly, maybe to 30. That's better. And then I'm going to increase the amount of the extrude there. So let's put 50 in to begin with. That something like that is reasonable. And so we've created our extrude. And if I was to OK that now, you can see that essentially what it's done is it's taken that extruded shape and it's merged it with the existing geometry in the part. So it's merged this extra extruded geometry with the original swept geometry, and it's amalgamated the two into a single part. And that's not what we wanted to do in this case. So if we go back into our extrude feature, and if you just note this little box here, it says merge result. So what I was describing there was it merging our new geometry that we're just about to create with the existing geometry in the part. So if you untick that box and then click on OK, visually nothing's changed, but what's appeared here is a folder called Solid Bodies, and then within that folder you can see that there's a bracketed 2 after the folder itself, and then within there are two distinct solids that are not amalgamated into a single whole. So you can see that I can select the one that is called Boss Extrude, that this represents my rubber handle for the part, and then the sweep one represents the what would be steel, probably tool steel, for the swept portion of the part. So in this way I can regard the two as two separate bodies, but I don't have to go to the trouble of creating an assembly to represent them. And as I say, this technique's more suitable for parts that have for products that have multiple parts that will never be disassembled. So if the parts can be disassembled at any point, you should use an assembly, really. But if the parts are going to be permanently bonded together, yet they are two separate distinct materials, let's say, it's often better to use the multi-body part. And the nice thing about this is, if I was to apply appearances to either one of these, I can apply a specific appearance to just one of the bodies and not the other one. So if I apply a metal based appearance to this one, let's say a cast carbon steel, I can apply it just to that body. So there you go. So the next portion of this tutorial, we're going to be looking at configurations, because what tends to happen is you won't just buy one of these keys in isolation, you buy them as part of a pack. And as we said when we were creating this represents the 6mm across flats Allen key, so that's the 6mm dimension across flats. And what we could do is we could now save this part, and we could save it as Allen key 6mm, and then if we wanted to create, say, a 5mm version of this, we'd keep this part open and then maybe do a save as and save out another copy as a 5mm, and then we could go in here and we could change this dimension and maybe change the lengths of the legs of this Allen key by a corresponding amount, and then we'd save that. We'd just do a save, and then we'd have a 5mm copy of it. But a far easier way of managing that sort of range of products with very similar underlying geometry, but just slight differences in the dimensions that are driving them, is we can use configurations. And as you can see, I've clicked on this tab here that's labelled as the configuration manager, and currently in here we have our part 3, and if you would save that with an overriding part name for the Allen key, maybe Allen key or hex wrench, no dimension after that. But then what you can do in the configurations tab is within this one part we can save all the different sizes of this Allen key that are available. So we're going to start doing that now. So it's got a version of the Allen key that's referred to as the default. We're actually going to change that. So if you want to click on that and then slow click a second time on it, it allows you to go in and change that that name. So we're going to call this the 6mm version, and then if we press enter, so we've got the 6mm version active. We also want to create a 5mm version of this. So if you right click at the top level here and click add configuration, and then we're going to call this one the 5mm, and then press enter. So you can see now that it's selected the 5mm that I've just created, the 5mm configuration. It's grayed out the 6mm version of this, and what this allows me to do is if I now wish to edit any of these dimensions, so I'm going to edit this 6mm by double clicking on it, type in 5, and then before I press enter or click on the tick up here, I'm going to open up this little sub menu here, and I'm going to say this configuration. So what I've done there, if I OK it now, is I've changed that dimension. So I just do a refresh of the part here. This is going to rebuild what I'm looking at on the screen. So you can see there it got slightly thinner. But what that's done is it's kept a copy of my original size, the 6mm, and if I double click here, I'll activate that 6mm version. So double click, it's saying, do you want me to rebuild? I do want it to rebuild. And you can see there we've gone back to the 6mm version of the part. So what configurations allows you to do are essentially save multiple versions of the same part inside of a single part file. So if you want to regard this as it's just a large table of dimensions that are stored inside the part, and for each configuration that I create here I can vary all these dimensions within that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into the 5mm one by double clicking. So I can double click and you can see the part updated there. I'm just double clicking back and forth from the 6mm to the 5mm. Normally what you'd have with these Allen keys is the smaller the size of the Allen keys, so a 5mm is smaller than 6mm, the smaller the legs on the Allen key, so this vertical leg and this horizontal leg. So I'm going to go in and just vary these as well. So let's drop this dimension. If I double click on that and get this modify box open, I'm going to reduce that down to something, say 22. And again, I'm not going to press enter or tick. I'm going to open up this little drop down box and say I only want to change it in this configuration, and then click on OK again. The window doesn't update automatically, but if I do this rebuild button there, you can see that it did update there. I'm going to do the same with the vertical length there. So again, double click. Sometimes when you double click you get to this entry box. That isn't what we want, so I'm going to hit escape and then try it again. Double click, there we go. We need this one, the modify box. I'm going to reduce this down to 80, and then again select just this configuration. I could do all the configurations, but I just want to vary it in this configuration. And then if I don't want to hit the rebuild button up here, I have a rebuild in my modify box. There you go. now you can see that the sleeve that we put on as a separate body also needs modifying, so I can do that. This length of the sleeve, again, I didn't get into the correct modify dimension box there, so I'm going to hit escape. There we go. I'm going to reduce this down to say 35, and again just for this configuration. Yeah, that looks good now. So now we have a 5mm configuration of the part and a 6mm configuration of the part, but we haven't had to create multiple copies and multiple part files on the hard disk. And the other nice thing about this, as well as minimizing the amount of part files that you need to save, it also means that if I want to change, say, this red color across the range, I just need to open up one file and then I can change that to a different shade, and it applies to all the sizes. So it minimizes work that you have to do. So I'm just going to create a few other versions of this just to illustrate the point again. So I right click on the part at the top, add configuration. I'm going to put a 4mm in here as well. So as soon as you create a new configuration, that one becomes active, which you can see here. It's the only one that's not grayed out. So now I can go in here and start changing some of these dimensions. 4mm, this configuration, do a rebuild. You can see that it changed. The same on here. And there are other ways of doing this. So say I want to change these two together, what I can do is select one, hold down Control, select the other. In fact, right click on one, go down to Configure Dimension, and then I get a table form showing the dimension that I'm editing here, and what value is stored for that dimension in all of my configurations. And if I want to add more columns onto that now, I should be able to click on some of the other dimensions and get those visible as well. There you go. If you double click on any of the dimensions in here, you can then have them added in as extra columns. So you can see there, it gives you a table form of what we were just doing. So in the 4mm, I'm going to reduce these legs down a little bit. So say down to 65. D2 here is this horizontal dimension. I'm going to reduce that down to say 18. And then again, the radius around the corner there, I'm going to reduce that down a little bit as well. So again, it's just a tabulated view of what we were doing on the model here. And then if we click on OK for that and do a rebuild, just check that that does change. There you go. So there's the original, the 6mm that we created, there's the 5mm that we created second, and there's a small 4mm version of the same thing. And again, we can vary any of the driving dimensions in this part. So let's reduce this down a bit to say 28, only on this configuration, and then do a rebuild. So you can see that we're building up a family of parts by using configurations.